When I think of Tom Rhodes, a few things come to mind. Good things. One of them, curiosity, wanderer, explorer. Have you heard these? Are these attachments that you?
I like the way you're starting.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the life I'm living. I don't know how people perceive it, and you are tickling me right on the spot that feels like the truth.
Yeah. As somebody your last album you did, it was how many countries did you record in for
around the world? I recorded it in 24 cities around the world. It starts in Paris, ends in Jerusalem. It's all mostly jokes and stories about each place.
Yeah.
I have been doing the international circuits for over 20 years, so a lot of places like Paris, Amsterdam. I had been playing for years, so I developed a nice little, 5-10 minute hunk that I chopped up into tracks. But then there were places like Jerusalem and Stockholm. There was a few places that I hadn't played before, and that I scrambled to write material. And I always like to learn about a culture and a country's history. Like, things are really fascinating. But the interesting detail about that album is it was supposed to be 25 tracks. There was supposed to be a Tokyo track playing. There's this great little room in Tokyo that I love. It's called Good Heavens. It only seats like 100 people. It's a British pub. And they do English language comedy there. And I had a crusher of a set, and I had all these like great details about Japan. Yeah. Japan is a very fascinating place. Like, if you commit suicide in Japan by jumping in front of a train, your family is sent a bill for disruption of service. I mean, there's like some really cold-blooded. Japan's got some really cold-blooded attributes. Like,
that's a very New Jersey.
People on death row in Japan are not told the day they're going to be executed. So
really?
It could be today. It could be 3 years from now. You have no idea. Which, I mean, that's like cruel, isn't it? Every time you hear the latch on the door open, is it lunch or is it goodbye? And the older population is so large in Japan that they actually sell more adult diapers than children's diapers in Japan.
Really?
So many fascinating, interesting things. So I had this like killer set about Japan, and I had all these, but I had this Zoom recorder on the ledge behind a really tiny little room. And at the end of my set, and I was so happy, I killed in Tokyo, and I got this track for my album that I had envisioned. I turned around and I knocked the recorder off, and it hit the ground, and the recording was lost.
No.
So that's why it's 24 tracks and not 25. But
I was recording in Arizona, not as fancy, but I was recording in Arizona. I did a similar thing. One of those Zoom recorders, you have to hit record twice, and I only hit record once. Had this set of a lifetime.
Set of your life, yeah. Of course.
Then you come off stage and you're like, I got it. I got the album, and you got nothing.
Well, I think the trick is to just record all the time.
Yeah,
because it was like in the old days, you're trying to get like a good piece of tape to send to a club, and it was always like, the night you recorded, there'd be like heckling and the worst
bachelorette party in the front row.
Some terrible circumstances. But now with technology, you can just burn, and you just recording stuff all the time. Like, I've been recording whenever I'm in the original room at the Comedy Store.
Yeah.
And so I always try to at least do like a 5-minute hunk. And so I'm almost finished with my third clean album.
Oh, wow.
Of clean material. So, and like, I never wanted to be a clean comedian. And I always, like, when I was younger, I always wanted to be edgy and kind of political, kind of cool, knowledgeable. Now, after the last few years in America, I don't want to do anything political. I don't want to talk about race. I just want to talk about funny stuff. I just want people to laugh and be entertained, and then try and get out my wisdom of all these things that I've learned traveling the world, and this career I've had, and many fabulous, love stories and beautiful, crazy lunatics that I know.
in this world that we're living in now, with content being king, right? We're just recording and posting all the time. Are you in favor of that? Do you think it's healthy? Do you think it's a healthy habit for us to just be, I don't want to say giving away material, because a lot of people just post heckler videos or crowd
That's
work or
the problem.
whatever.
A lot of comedians are posting all these videos and it's just crowd work. So I think like a lot of like younger people who aren't exposed to a lot of stand-up comedy might think that's what stand-up comedy is.
Yeah.
Just like people goofing on the audience. I think it can be burdensome to put so much energy into, like, I had a podcast. I haven't put out an episode since August. I've been kind of lazy, but I've also been going through some personal trials and tribulations. I needed to step back and focus on my stand-up. And, trying to put out a podcast every week and then trying to put out all these videos and clips, it's like having a job.
Yeah.
And, you have to have a certain work ethic to be a great comedian, a great anything, a great electrician or dentist or plumber. But
but we used to work on the act,
I think you got to
keep
that original joy of what comedy is for you. And we all go through ups and downs in life. It was really hard to do stand-up comedy after my father and my sister passed, because I was just, heartbroken. And then, relationship problems are a paper cut compared to the axe wound of losing a loved one. But, you go through enough in life where you got to stay mentally proper for, that. There's times in your life where it's difficult and you're having problems, but just to keep that original energy of joy of why you fell in love with stand-up comedy to begin with and why you do it, I think that is more important than putting out content constantly, And I've chopped up a bunch of content. I've actually taken a little break from posting things. There's a book I just finished reading by Ryan Holiday called "Ego is the Enemy."
Okay, I love Ryan Holiday.
I love Ryan Holiday.
I do the Daily Stoic.
I really got into Stoicism. I've always been into Stoicism, but since the pandemic hit in 2020, I really, went back, started, reading Seneca, and then Ryan Holiday's The Daily Stoic.
I love it.
Beautiful
love
book. And Ego is the Enemy. It talks about how, playing this game of modern, your brand and trying to market yourself and constantly putting out
this daily validation.
Yeah, this need for the approval of the likes and all that. Yeah. I think it's a great book in how it just coaches you to step back and be reminded that doing great work silently, and then getting some recognition or not getting recognition, just knowing you're doing the best work you can possibly do is better than,
Yeah, just constantly posting to have something on your feed. I think that's what we're falling into. Unfortunately, is just put up anything that you have to keep the audience interested. But you're going to exhaust the audience. There's no excitability if you're posting daily garbage. If you're just posting, oh, it's your birthday, and you're heckling somebody or whatever. Yeah. That's way different than posting clips of an hour that you've worked on or a film that you're curating and all those things.
Yeah, what is your dream? Is your dream to be a TikTok star at 56?
So as somebody who is a world traveler, a wanderer, and so curious, how did the pandemic and the lockdown affect you as an artist? Because you're gone constantly. You're touring all the time. How did that affect you mentally and career-wise to be locked in one place for a while?
I didn't realize how bad I needed a year off until the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And it was such a joy to sleep in my own bed every night and not have to be I was a real road warrior. Everybody knows that. And then not only constantly being on the road 2 or 3 weeks a month, I was doing the international circuits.
Right.
So incredibly long flights, and then even just traveling within America. Flying is not the experience it used to be.
No,
you know,
it's not.
they herd everybody on like
Yeah.
cattle. They have very little respect for you. You know, the trick is, like, I love Delta Airlines, so I stuck with one airline for always, even paying more money
Yeah.
for tickets to build up the points on one airline, and then you get the status, and then there's little perks like, you know, upgrades and getting to board with first class if you get to a
Right.
certain thing. But even doing it at the nicest level, traveling is tiresome, and it's a younger man's game.
Yeah,
And,
I think that's the part that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to stand-up is they think you sleep in till noon, you come here to the show, you talk to some strangers for an hour or whatever, and then it's like that's the job, and it's like, no, there's a whole lot of other things
the main
going
thing
on
about
behind the
well, I wish
scenes.
someone would have told me when I was younger, like, you know, how much car trouble you were going to have as a comedian when you're like doing the road in America, driving.
Yeah.
Like so many times in the first 10 years of my career, I was like broken down on the highway. And,
Yeah.
you know, thank God for AAA. But you know, just traveling relentlessly. There's so much logistics that you have to deal with as a comedian.
Yeah.
You know, booking hotels on off nights, booking flights, and, you know,
Staying on people's minds, booking agents,
you get to
the
a
whole
club,
thing,
and you know,
yeah.
usually you're there for 4 days, and the Thursday and Friday you got to wake up and do morning radio and all these kind of things that I enjoyed the time off.
Yeah.
And then to refocus on why I became. It was almost like starting over again when the pandemic.
Yeah.
When finally they allowed the clubs to open in California, but again, it was like being reminded of why I became a comedian in the first place. You know,
Yeah.
and then just to the simple joy of like writing jokes, taking it, and just kind of just staying in LA. Playing the clubs, and I've only been kind of doing the West Coast,
Yeah.
Gigs I can drive to. I mean, I was in Paris last year. I did some sets.
That's a pretty big
I
drive.
got a show in Buenos Aires next month, so I'm starting to you know,
Get out there again.
get out there again. But I don't ever want to go back to being on the road. I had
a similar shift in that thought because I was doing 40 to 46 weeks a year on the road, and then when the pandemic hit, it was all gone. It wasn't just like, oh, it trickled off. It just disappeared. And
I didn't work for over a year. I'm sure
Yeah.
you as well.
Yeah, and I had similar thoughts about, I needed this break, and this is nice to be home and again in your own bed, and you're discovering different things about yourself and whatever. But I don't know if you struggle with this or not, but I had a big kind of identity crisis because I started.
Well, that was the thing. I didn't realize how my whole social world is all connected to comedy, and all my best friends are comedians. And then you're seeing your friends when you're working and you're doing sets. And
because you started young too, right?
When I got to do sets again, that was what I said. I felt like I got my identity back because you're just like, some normal Joe without it.
Yeah, because you started at like 17?
17.
I started at 19, and so it was the same thing. It was comedy was everything that I was, and when it was gone, it was like, well, who am I without it? And I don't know if you kind of struggle with that part of it, not only the social aspect, but just your identity as a human, just being like, well, what am I without comedy? What am I without having these dates on the calendar and the value that we place on ourselves with our careers and all that stuff? Because, in comedy, we are kind of measured up to how much we're working.
Well, I'll tell you this, my brother. Comedy's the only thing that never let me down.
Yeah.
Relationships, family, there's so many things in life where you just have no control.
Yeah.
And people, comedy's always there, and it's a great healer.
Oh, it's
And
incredible. Yeah.
It has gotten me through the toughest periods of my life. And, thank God for comedy. I mean, I always say the comedy clubs are like hospitals for souls, and I'm here to attend to the wounded. It's like extremist thought, but it works the same for a comedian, I think all human beings past the age of 5 are damaged in a certain way. And it's just, Jesus, it's so cleansing for the soul to get out there and, present some idea that you wrote with a funny twist.
Yeah.
And just hear that wave of laughter wash over you. It's gotten me through the best and the toughest times of my life.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's not only healing for us, but it's healing for the audience as well. I can't tell you how many times audience members come up afterwards and thought, it said, I thought I was the only one that felt that way, or I was talking a lot about grief for a while on stage, and I didn't realize that it was connecting in a different way, and so audiences were coming up, and it shifted from like, oh, you were so funny, to we just lost my brother, we just lost my father, that kind of thing. And what you were saying really resonated, and this and that. And we forget that is what comedy does as well. It's not only just a date night out or whatever. Sometimes it hits a nerve in a good way.
Like sometimes when I see someone by themselves in a comedy club, I mean, I'm a big enough fan where I've gone to music shows and comedy shows. I've gone to plenty of comedy shows and bought a solo ticket because I was so in love with that performer.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I see one person by themselves, I always wonder, oh, maybe they might be going through something and need to put their brain on a shelf and hear someone else's chatter instead of their own. I had a woman come up to me after a show in Arcata, California, 5 years ago. She told me after the show, she was like maybe 60. She said that her husband had died a few months before, and I had made her laugh where there hadn't even been a smile.
Oh,
she hadn't even smiled.
That's great.
Since her husband died, and I made her laugh. And so, like, somebody tells you something like that. I remember after my first Comedy Central half-hour special, some guy sent me an email and said that his grandmother was dying, and everybody got to spend time with the grandmother.
Yeah.
As, their last time that they had. And while he got to spend this last time with her, they watched Comedy Central, and my special came on. Yeah. And he sat on the hospital bed with his grandmother and watched it, and he said that they laughed together. And then after this special, they talked about the things that I talked about,
right.
Which is like what I used to do with my father. When we used to watch specials when I was younger together, and afterwards we talked about like the parts that we liked, and critique it and then praise it as well. And the guy wrote me this email that his grandmother had died, and that forever that will be his greatest memory was laughing with her at my Comedy Central half-hour special. So that's great. People tell you things like that, and it's you can't help but feel blessed by the divine creator to have this ability to make people laugh and forget about their problems for a minute.
Is that where you fell in love with stand-up? Was with your father watching? Was that like a?
My dad loved comedy. Loved Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
My dad had Pryor vinyl records and Bob Newhart. So that's like where I started in comedy was Pryor and Bob Newhart.
I see a lot of Bob Newhart in your act. Yeah, that's right.
love Newhart. I really do. And I feel like comedians are my tribe. I think we transcend like race and gender and sexual preference. I mean, I've always looked at comedy as we're our own tribe. So I feel kind of related to all comedians. But my uncle did open mic night comedy in Washington, D.C. for 1 year. And I remember driving around with my dad listening to Pryor cassettes or 8-tracks. And in the early 70s when I was a youngster, they didn't have seatbelts, and I was next to my father with my arm on his shoulder. Yeah. And I remember my dad driving, and I remember like as he's laughing, I could feel his shoulders quake, and I just wow, so that's where I fell in love with comedy, and then my uncle did open mic night comedy for 1 year in Washington D.C. At a place called El Brookman's. My father took me to see his show, and it was a thin shotgun shack room, and the stage was next to the front entrance. And I was wearing a Washington Redskins jacket. And we walked in, and the show was in progress. The comedian on stage pulled me on stage and interviewed me like I was the coach of the Redskins. And that's the moment that changed my life. Ever since that moment, I never wanted to be anything but a stand-up comedian. Never even considered anything else.
So you've been doing comedy since you were 17. You're not only traveling in the United States, but you're international. This has not been just a year or two. This has been your entire life that you've been kind of a nomad. How are you still inspired, and what gets you going to write and process this material that is still so relatable to people that aren't in that nomadic lifestyle? Like, how are you creating content that is so relatable that's in a life that's not relatable to most people?
Well, I'm not so nomadic anymore. I've been,
Right.
I've been enjoying being a true Californian. Roller skating, hot yoga, and stand-up comedy. That's the trinity of my life right now. I've never thought about like kind of pandering to the audience. I've always thought like sharing the best of my knowledge and the things that I find interesting. Like I was on vacation in Montana 2 summers ago, and I went into a hunting store, and they sold doe urine, and deer hunters use doe urine when a doe wants to mate with other. She sprays her urine on the bushes, and it attracts the male deer, and deer hunters use this. So, I joke about that, like. I mean, even if you're from the city and you've never hunted, you can understand that concept.
Yeah.
And then telling stories about things that have happened to me in different countries, people can relate to. I haven't drank alcohol in 9 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, got some jokes about that I think, I mean, even if you were a drinker and a partier, you could appreciate the wisdom that somebody's throwing down. So for me, the best comedy is the kind of comedy that you can learn something from, where it's not just, dirty jokes or stupid jokes or crowd work or whatever, where like, it's good if you can get to know the performer a little bit when they open up a little bit about their life, But I mean, like if a comedian does jokes about a breakup, you're not hearing the ex-girlfriend side of the story,
right? Exactly.
So I mean, there is some one-sided victimness to some of it, but for me, I think sharing the best of my knowledge, and like you said, I have a curiosity, and I think that's my unique gift to the comedy world, is that I have a lot of wisdom from the life I've led, the world travels, and just almost 40 years of stand-up comedy experience. Like there was a guy who watched me last night, this comedian, and he goes, Jesus, I just sat back and watched just so to see a performer who's just so solid, and that like you can take the audience anywhere, and it doesn't matter. Like if it's a bad audience, they'll become a good audience just from the sheer force of the delivery and the performance. And I mean, I think it's like, it's the same with preachers, and it's the same at the hot yoga studio, and it's certainly true with comedians. There's good ones, there's average ones, and then there's ones that electrify you. Yeah. And I want to electrify. I want to be remembered forever, and I want I want to, I want to heal people through the power of laughter. I want, people to remember that I made them feel really good and laugh their ass off about a few things.
I like that. You mentioned earlier about how comedy is the only relationship that hasn't let you down. And you just mentioned hearing one side of the story on stage with comics. So what's your side of it? What are you bringing to the table for comedy? How do you stay interested? How do you still stay in love with it?
You mean like as if it was a relationship?
Yeah.
My relationship with stand-up comedy. How am I?
Yeah. How are you keeping? Yeah. How are you keeping the spark alive?
Well, as a man who's divorced,
yes,
but still best friends with his ex-wife, I can tell you, stand-up comedy is like a relationship or a marriage. The trick is never letting it go stale. When you get comfortable and you're in that that comfort zone where you don't change anything, that's when relationships and marriages fall apart. Yeah. And that's where comedians fall off the radar and disappear into wherever they disappear to. When you're comfortable and you're doing the same thing, repeatedly, it's boring. And jealousy is not the greatest threat to a relationship. Boredom is the greatest threat to a relationship. So I think you got to keep it really exciting, and you got to, to keep it exciting, you got to make it exciting for yourself. And I think the trick is, and what I try to do in my relationship with stand-up comedy is to never let it go stale. That I always want to be, fresh and lively and,
Yeah.
I would say relevant, but I don't even care about politics or I want to write timeless, great humor, because I think that's all that we have to leave behind after we die is the art that we create in our lifetime. And I want to leave a body of great work that hopefully still makes people laugh many years down the road.
Is legacy important to you? Is that something you think about a lot?
No, I mean, I think I would have not moved to Europe and done a lot of things if I was overly concerned about legacy. Just doing great work and hoping somebody sees it. I've done a couple Comedy Central specials. I did one Netflix special that's now on Amazon. But I've made 7 albums.
Yeah.
And those, that's my legacy that I'm happy to leave behind.
I mean, that's a pretty impressive body of work.
So I mean, the gatekeepers of comedy specials. I mean, you can film your own now and put it on YouTube, but for me, the albums will always be important because that was my entry and discovery into stand-up comedy.